1 p.m. GMT.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with his Vietnamese counterpart Pham Minh Chinh in New Delhi. Several MoUs signed between the two countries. Israeli military confirms the death of head of Hamas's military wing, Mohammad Daif. And Indian shooter Swapnil Khusale wins bronze, the third for India at the Paris Olympics shooting event. With this, Swapnil becomes the first Indian to win a medal in the men's 50-meter rifle 3 positions. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with his Vietnamese counterpart Pham Minh Chinh in New Delhi on Thursday. After the talks, several MoUs were signed between India and Vietnam in the presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. This was signed at the Hyderabad House. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vietnamese Prime Minister jointly inaugurated the Army Software Park at the Telecommunications University in Nha Trang, Vietnam. A memorandum of understanding was also signed between India's public service broadcaster Prasar Bharati and Vietnamese national broadcaster Voice of Vietnam on exchange of radio and television programs in the fields of culture, education, science, entertainment, sports, history, tourism, news as areas of mutual interest, subject to contractual and intellectual property laws in force in their respective countries. And now let's get you details of this memorandum of understanding that was signed between India and Vietnam. So under the agreement between Prasar Bharati and the Voice of Vietnam, parties will exchange radio, television programs and documentaries in the fields of culture, education, news, science, entertainment, sports, history, tourism. A program to be exchanged via an email of the focal contact or FPT server. They will be subject to contractual and intellectual property laws. Both parties to broadcast these exchange products on radio, television and digital platforms. The exchange of programs are subject to commercial agreements. Parties are free to broadcast programs provided on or payment basis without change in their structure. The exchange of programs are subject to commercial agreements. In case of exchange on commercial basis, terms and conditions shall be determined by the two parties. The receiving party not allowed to supply programs to third party for broadcasting without prior consent. Both parties to explore co-production opportunities related to matters of mutual interest. Participation in significant events, festivals and competitions agreed upon. The parties may mutually exchange personnel and provide training to each other's staff. Both parties to nominate focal contact to supervise and further discuss implementation of this MoU. And any dispute or difference between parties to be settled through mutual consultations and negotiations. So these are the details of the MoU signed between Prasar Bharati, India's public service broadcaster, and Voice of Vietnam, the public service broadcaster of Vietnam. Now, while delivering a joint statement with Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh at the Hyderabad House, Prime Minister Narendra Modi called Vietnam an important partner in the Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific vision. He stated that the two nations have had good coordination regarding the Indo-Pacific and support evolution and not expansionism.
हमारी एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी और हमारे इंडो पैसिफिक विजन में वियतनाम हमारा महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनर है। इंडो पैसिफिक के बारे में हम दोनों के विचारों में अच्छा सामंजस्य है। हम विस्तारवाद नहीं, विकासवाद का समर्थन करते हैं। हम फ्री, ओपन, रूल्स बेस्ड और समृद्ध इंडो पैसिफिक के लिए अपने सहयोग को जारी रखेंगे।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi also stated that a new plan of action has been made to further strengthen our comprehensive strategic partnership.
डिफेंस और सिक्योरिटी के क्षेत्र में सहयोग के लिए नए कदम उठाए हैं। नया चांग में बने आर्मी सॉफ्टवेयर पार्क का आज उद्घाटन किया गया। $300 मिलियन की क्रेडिट लाइन पर बनी सहमति से वियतनाम की मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी सशक्त होगी। हमने यह भी तय किया है कि आतंकवाद और साइबर सुरक्षा इस विषयों पर सहयोग को बल दिया जाएगा।
In his address, Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh lauded India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership in bringing dramatic increase in the living standards of Indian people.
The leadership of the BJP and the Prime Minister have brought about great benefit to the Indian people. We are deeply impressed by the hallmark of His Executive Prime Minister, such as electricity coverage for 28 million poor households, 5G connection, social security, and a dramatic increase in people's living standard, and food security for all, including 800 million who benefit from free food. This is a result of a great effort from the Indian government and His Excellency Prime Minister personally.
During his three-day visit to India, Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh called on India's President Draupadi Murmu at the Indian President's house or the Rashtrapati Bhavan in New Delhi today. The visiting dignitary also met the Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankar, at the Vice President's enclave. Both the two leaders reflected on the diverse aspects of India-Vietnam bilateral ties, with focus on strengthening economic cooperation and people-to-people ties between the two countries. Earlier in the day, Vietnamese Prime Minister met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Hyderabad House in New Delhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed his Vietnamese counterpart with a warm gesture. Both the leaders held bilateral talks at the Hyderabad House in the national capital. Substantive discussions to further energize the India-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership topped the agenda. Both the leaders held wide-ranging talks and agreed to further expand the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. Earlier, Prime Minister Narendra Modi received his Vietnamese counterpart at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where he received a ceremonial welcome at the forecourts of the President's house in the morning local time. The visiting dignitary also inspected a guard of honor by the Combined Defence Services of India. The leader also visited Rajghat and paid floral tributes to Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Vietnamese Prime Minister is on a three-day visit to India. On to other international updates now. Russia announced on Thursday that their troops were prepared to shoot down Ukraine's first batch of F-16 fighter jets. Kremlin further said that the F-16 jets will not be a panacea for Kiev's army. On Wednesday, Lithuanian and US officials confirmed that Ukraine had received the first order of the long-awaited jets. According to Ukraine, the inclusion of the F-16 will be a significant addition to their air force. And now let's go live to New Delhi, where the Ministry of External Affairs is holding a press briefing. Let's go live there.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to this special briefing by Secretary East, Shri Jaideep Mazumdar, on the state visit of the Prime Minister of Socialist Republic of Vietnam, His Excellency Pham Chin Minh. We also joined on the dais by Joint Secretary South, who looks after Vietnam in the Ministry of External Affairs, Shri Ashish Sinha. With that, I give the floor to Secretary, sir. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Randhir, and a very good evening to you all. As Randhir has just prefaced, the Prime Minister of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam has been here since the 30th evening on a state visit. When he arrived on the 30th, he was received at the airport by Minister of State for External Affairs, Shri Pavitra Margarita. Yesterday he had a series of engagements, including a business event. He had brought with him a very large business delegation. This was followed by events in the Chancery. They have a new embassy building which was inaugurated, and they had a community event. The main official engagements were all today. The visit of the Prime Minister is after quite some time. He has been Prime Minister since 2021 when he was appointed. He has met our Prime Minister 3 times last year actually, but this is his first visit to India, and was a very important visit which comes after 8 years after our Prime Minister Modi, paid a very historic visit to Vietnam when our bilateral relationship was elevated to the highest level of relationship that they have, which is a comprehensive strategic partnership. And over these 8 years, both sides have been working on the agenda of our bilateral partnership, and therefore this was an occasion to take stock of where we are and to plan the road for the future. So earlier today, Prime Minister Pham Chin was accorded a ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan forecourt by the Prime Minister. You have seen the visuals. It was a very grand, solemn, grand, and yet a ceremony that was full of warmth. You saw the warmth between the 2 Prime Ministers in that event. This was followed in the official engagements by restricted level talks with our Prime Minister, followed by delegation level talks and a lunch, and the Prime Minister called on Rashtrapati Ji and also Uparashtrapati Ji. Honorable External Affairs Minister had met him yesterday evening. So it was a full day of engagements for the Prime Minister, and he also addressed a little while ago the ICWA had organized in Sapru House a strategic talk by him on strategic policy matters. As you know, Vietnam is one of our closest partners in the ASEAN region and a pillar of our Act East policy. It is a country with which we have a long and historic and civilizational relationship, which has blossomed into many different fields, in the defense and security field, in the economic trade and investment field, in people-to-people contact. So all these are very bright areas of our cooperation. Vietnam today is a rapidly growing economy, as you know, and is similar to our Viksit Bharat 2047. They also have Vietnam 2045 vision to become a developed country, a high-income developed country by 2045. And this was a common refrain today in the discussions. The Vietnamese Prime Minister referred to it several times, that we have similar ambitions. Our bilateral trade is about $15 billion, although both sides do feel that this could be significantly increased, and the very large business delegation that accompanied the Prime Minister speaks to the interest that Vietnamese business has in India. A joint statement on enhancing our comprehensive strategic partnership and a plan of action for the implementation for the next 4 years, 2024-28, were the two key outcomes of the visit. In addition, we signed a number of agreements, 9 in all, to further broaden and deepen our cooperation. These are in very diverse areas. You will see a list of that on the website. They cover everything from cooperation in medicinal plants to customs cooperation to radio and television programming, legal field, heritage conservation, etc. Both sides discussed common security challenges and agreed to further enhance our defense ties, which is a very important pillar of our partnership, as I have said. 2 lines of credit agreements were signed between Vietnam's Ministry of Finance and the Import Bank of India, amounting to $300 million US. This was part of the package that Prime Minister, during his visit to Vietnam, had announced some time ago, and the actual identification of the projects that these 2 lines of credit will be used for has now been completed. One of them is for Coast Guard ships, and the other is for border patrol, fast border patrol boats. Both the Prime Ministers witnessed the signing and exchange of the MoUs, and at that time they also virtually inaugurated the Army Software Park in the Telecommunications University in Nha Trang in Vietnam, which has been completed under an Indian grant. Vietnam also announced that it will join the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and the early completion of procedures for joining the International Solar Alliance was also indicated. Prime Minister reiterated that Vietnam is a critical pillar in India's Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific. The leaders spoke of the importance of the rules-based order in the region, including upholding international law, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and freedom of navigation and overflight. They reaffirmed that a peaceful, stable, secure, free, open, inclusive and rules-based region is in the common interest of all the countries. Preservation of shared heritage was also one of the dimensions in which we cooperate with Vietnam. India has provided technical assistance worth $2.25 million for conservation and restoration of UNESCO World Heritage Site at My Son in Quang Nam Province. ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India, has completed the restoration of 3 of the sites, and a letter of intent was signed for the F block of temples in the area of conservation of shared heritage. Also, an MoU for development of the National Maritime Heritage Complex at Lothal was also signed in this context. The Prime Ministers underscored the importance of closer people-to-people exchanges, with tourism booming between the countries, anything between 300,000 to 400,000 in number. There are as many as 56 flights a week between the 2 countries, which shows that the people-to-people relationship is also booming. Both sides discussed opportunities to cooperate on global South issues, where Vietnam participated in the first and the second Voice of the Global South Summit hosted by India last year. And both sides also agreed to enhance parliamentary exchanges. The meeting between the 2 leaders has been highly productive, affording them an opportunity to comprehensively review the full spectrum of bilateral relations. Vietnam's unequivocal support for India's permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council was also reiterated today, as was Vietnam's support for India playing a greater role in world affairs. In conclusion, I could say that the India-Vietnam relationship is a civilizational is one of civilizational friends, and India as a trusted partner was reiterated again and again by the Vietnamese Prime Minister. I will now take some questions if you have any.
So, Ayushi, we can start from you.
So this is Ayush Shegwal from ANI. Good evening. Can we have more details on the discussion in defense sector? Because there were reports that Vietnam is interested in acquiring the BrahMos missile. So was there any discussion on that? And also, was the recent situation in the West Asia discussed between the two leaders? Thank you.
Siddhant?
So Siddhant from WION, how much was the situation in South China Sea discussed? We saw the Vietnamese Prime Minister making references to it while standing alongside the Prime Minister.
Uma?
So I'm Huma Siddiqui from the Financial Express. Was the energy security discussed? Because India has been looking for exploration in the South China Sea. If
One more question, sir.
Good evening, sir. Rishabh Times Now. So the Indochina Peninsula, there is a lot of stories coming in about the human trafficking, be it from Laopedia, be it from Vietnam, Thailand or Myanmar. Was this also discussed between the leaders?
Okay, so I have 4 questions here on the defense sector. While I will not go into specifics, within the comprehensive strategic partnership that we have, defense collaboration, as I have said, is a very important pillar. And both leaders recognize that industry collaboration is a priority. Indeed, defense industry cooperation has emerged as a very significant area, as I have described to you in my initial presentation, including the defense lines of credit. We have signed an implementation arrangement for defense industry cooperation, which establishes a framework for such cooperation. Then we also have an overarching approach to defense supplies for Vietnam, guided by their specific requirements. Technology transfers in defense production was also one of the areas identified by the Vietnamese side as an area of their interest. Turning to the South China Sea, both sides, as I have said, discussed the importance of the South China Sea. The fact was emphasized by the Vietnamese Prime Minister that 60% of, as much as 60% of global trade passes through the area, and the importance of a free, open and waterway and lines of sea lines was of utmost importance. Freedom of navigation and overflight is of utmost importance, and that a peaceful, stable, secure, free and open and inclusive and rules-based region is something that both Vietnam and India share as important for us as well as for others in the region. On energy security, we have, as you know, as you rightly pointed out, we have been in the region in Vietnam for over now 35 years. ONGC Videsh has a concession there. We operate in a block along with Vietnam and with Russia. The oil wells there have been productive for a long time. We have also now extended the concession last year, and we look forward to new exploration in that region. On the issue of scam centers that you asked about, we do not have any such instances in Vietnam, although we have in other parts of Southeast Asia. So whereas we do take this issue up in our interactions with counterparts from the countries in that region, and we have done it at the level of External Affairs Minister as well recently, and whenever I also meet my counterparts, we take up these issues, but not with Vietnam, because Vietnam is not specifically involved in that. Have any other questions?
Kalol?
This is Kalol.
I'm sorry.
From the Hindu.
I'm sorry. I think I missed the question on West Asia. The two leaders discussed many issues. The West Asia issue did not immediately come up for discussion.
Kalol?
This is Kalol Bhattacharjee from the Hindu, sir. The Prime Minister mentioned, the Vietnamese Prime Minister mentioned Myanmar was discussed. So I wanted to know, I mean, was there a common approach discussed? Because he said that it's not a single country which could come up with a solution to such a problem, and it required collective efforts. So could you please elaborate on if there was a solution approach that was also discussed?
So Myanmar, of course, is also an ASEAN country, member of ASEAN. It's also a member of BIMSTEC. It's also our neighboring country with which we share a very long border. So being an ASEAN member state, we did have discussions with Vietnam regarding Myanmar, and the fact that both India and Vietnam support the 5 principles that the ASEAN have emphasized as their attitude, as their policy towards Myanmar. And both sides did talk about the importance of peace and stability in Myanmar. So in that respect.
Ayansha?
So this is Ayansha Metro. So if you could elaborate what the two heads of government discussed regarding the Global South.
So Prime Minister appreciated the fact that Vietnam has been very supportive of the Global South and has attended both the events that we had last year, and hoped that Vietnam would participate in our future activities with regard to the Global South. And the Vietnamese Prime Minister assured that Vietnam would be a very willing and happy participant in all our initiatives in the Global South. As I mentioned, he indicated that Vietnam is fully supportive of India's role in world affairs and all the initiatives that we take.
So if there are no more questions, Uma?
So I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned that we are also giving them a line of credit in defense. So how much is that credit?
There are 2 lines of credit. One is 180 million and the other is 120 million. So total of $300 million.
Both in defense sector?
Both in defense, yes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming for this press engagement, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
That was Jaideep Majumdar, Secretary East in India's Ministry of External Affairs. The briefing was on the takeaways of bilateral talks held between India and Vietnam on Thursday. Well, both sides have signed and exchanged 9 MoUs for cooperation in customs capacity building, agriculture research, education, maritime heritage, conservation, medicinal plants, and also in legal fields. Prasar Bharati and Voice of Vietnam have exchanged MoU for cooperation in radio and television fields, and both sides have also exchanged MoUs on credit line agreements for defense and restoration of Myanmar UNESCO World Heritage Site in Vietnam. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles. And of course, for those on the go, you can download our DD India mobile app for quick news and updates. So we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.